Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you all today. I want to thank Godfrey and NTTA for inviting the Permitting Council back to this conference to talk with you all about FAST-41 and the Permitting Council. FAST-41 is our permitting assistance program, and we're definitely interested in chatting with folks and letting you know about FAST-41 and how we can support more tribal broadband projects through the federal permitting process. So my name is Poqueen Rivera. I'm from the Pueblo of Pewaukee, and I serve as the Director of Tribal Affairs for the Permitting Council. And I'm joined here today by my colleague Craig over there, who also works for the Permitting Council, and we're excited to be here with Kimball and Phoebe, who are helping to spearhead the Santa Fe Indian School Pueblo Education Network, which is a 300+ mile fiber optic network in New Mexico that's covered by FAST-41. And I'll let them do longer introductions when I pass the mic over. But today I'd like to start by giving you all a brief overview of what FAST-41 and the Permitting Council is, and then I'll pass it off to the other folks to talk more about the Pueblo Education Network and how FAST-41 is hopefully working out for them. So I realize that the Permitting Council is a relatively new federal agency and it's not well known, so I will start at the beginning. Could go to the next slide. Okay, so for anyone that's tried to build an infrastructure project that requires NEPA, Section 106, or any other type of environmental review or permit, you're probably very familiar with some of the sentiments of frustration on the listed on this slide. And I think it's well known that the federal permitting process is relatively difficult to navigate, and there's often not clear coordination between federal agencies. And when federal permits get delayed, then the overall cost of the project can go up. So Congress created the Federal Permitting Council and our program that we administer, FAST-41, to solve the very real problems of inefficiency and the lack of accountability in the federal permitting process. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So which agencies sit on the Permitting Council? The Permitting Council consists of high-level officials of the 13 federal agencies that are involved in permitting infrastructure projects, along with the White House Office of Management and Budget and the Council on Environmental Quality. And the Permitting Council is chaired by my boss and Craig's boss, the Executive Director of the Permitting Council, and he chairs the Permitting Council. And I think what's important about the council makeup is that FAST-41 projects have visibility of high-level officials in each agency, and the council meets regularly to discuss projects in FAST-41 to ensure progress and ensure that the federal permitting process is being coordinated, there's collaboration and transparency on the projects in our portfolios. If we could go to the next slide. So the Permitting Council currently manages a portfolio of nearly $100 billion in large-scale complex infrastructure projects in the 19 sectors listed on this slide. And we're very excited to have our first broadband projects come into FAST-41 this year, 2023, both of which are tribal-sponsored projects and funded through NTIA. And of course, one of those projects is the Santa Fe Indian School Pueblo Education Network. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so what types of assistance do projects receive when they're in FAST-41? Projects that are in FAST-41 are entitled to unique benefits, including a comprehensive and transparent permitting timetable that includes all of the required environmental reviews and authorizations that are required for siting, planning, and constructing a project. They also get an integrated process that brings all of the federal agencies involved in that project together to create a permitting timetable and to coordinate on that timetable moving forward on the project. Project sponsors also get enhanced communication with federal agencies, and any modifications that are made to the permitting timetable is done in coordination with the project sponsor. So you're in contact with federal agencies often, and they're letting you know why your timetable is moving or being delayed, or working with you on issues to get the permits done. And last but not least, FAST-41 has a clear escalation procedure for resolving any issues that might arise in the permitting process. All right, next slide. So how does a project become eligible for FAST-41? There are three main categories that would make a project eligible for FAST-41 coverage, but the great news is that Congress has given tribal projects the most flexibility to be covered under FAST-41. So as long as the project is subject to NEPA and falls within one of those 19 sectors that was listed on a previous slide, the project would be eligible for FAST-41 coverage. There are some nuances, so if you're interested in FAST-41, please don't hesitate to reach out to Craig or I, and we can talk through your project specifically just to make sure that it qualifies. But I think, the tribal criteria is really great because typically a project would have to have an investment of $200 million or more, which is a huge, investment, and for tribal projects, Congress waived that requirement. So, I think that's enough from me. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Permitting Council, who we are, and what FAST-41 is. And I'm gonna pass it off to Kimball and Phoebe to explain a little bit more about the Pueblo Education Network, and then Craig will walk you all through what the permitting timetable for this project looks like and how it functions.
Okay, next slide. A picture? Oh, yes, there you go. So good morning, everybody. My name is Kimball Sikakwaptiwa. I'm from the Santa Fe Indian School, and I'm representing the Pueblo Education Network today with this latest phase. So we've been working at this for a while, and we're excited that TBCP funded that hot pink big U-shape line on the slide. It's about 324 miles, and we're going down from Albuquerque at a, when we started doing this, coming from education, it was to connect schools and libraries. And it was to create a private cloud environment so that we could develop, in particular, our native language curriculum. So I guess if I'm going back, I should say, remember the BTOP era for some of you guys with ERA funding and, the stimulus funding. It was the big first tranche of broadband funding federally. And it was short-lived. And then E-rate for schools and libraries would be the next $4.5 billion fund or something. And E-rate before that was just you could get a discount on your school's phone bill, which was great, except that if you could only get a T1 where you lived, getting, a great discount off of nothing didn't amount to anything. So they allowed for building networks, if you could make that case. So that's how we ended up trying to work with our tribal schools and libraries in the Pueblos, because we were our best solution to getting high-speed, affordable internet in our communities. And we did it for the purposes of education. So when we, in that BTOP era, we weren't successful, but I met the vendor community, I met the partner community, and we were able to bring in a provider actually that had never served in Santa Fe before to bring us fiber-based internet connectivity. And then we turned out to our tribal communities like, we're connected, let's do all this awesome video conferencing for language and culture curriculum. And everybody was too slow to talk back. So then my leadership said, okay, you've been doing E-rate forever, Kimball, just go help our tribal libraries apply. It's a bear of a program, as we know. We love it, but sometimes we don't like it that much. And we were able to build these two consortia and prove that we could do it. And it really, because it was coming from within community. Myself as a tribal educator and somebody who could provide technical assistance, our tribal librarians, our tribal education directors, our tribal administrators, sometimes our lawyers. We didn't appreciate the importance of lawyering at that time, and now we do. So we came together and we knew how to work with our internal processes to build these networks. And we did, and they're operating now. It's a regional middle mile network. And, you know, they're not, the operation and maintenance is important and significant, but they don't have 100 calls like, oh, my router doesn't work, my internet doesn't work. So they're very stable, and our communities benefited from it. At that same time, when we went back and realized the limitations of that program in particular, because all these programs have so many rules, right? And we knew that if we were making this effort, it was going to be important to connect beyond schools and libraries. So the tribe self-invested and put in additional infrastructure at that time to serve government, health, environmental protection, and then get to the homes as well. So it was during COVID when we really saw the benefit, because this is where we put in these regional networks that those communities for a few $100,000 could put in networks to reach those students in the homes that were locked in. And really help with the remote learning. So it's been a bit of an odyssey, but a good one. And this last phase is really exciting because we're really able to get out to some remote places and to put in this middle mile infrastructure. So if you see like that hot pink line, and the green line coming down from where the Santa Fe Indian School is, we're participating in a statewide conversation and working very closely with Kelly, our broadband director, to lay infrastructure that's not only going to serve our tribal communities, but it's going to serve rural New Mexico. And our purpose is definitely for education, connecting the schools and libraries along the way. And I'll say that the design characteristic that's really important is we home run all of those sovereign, tribally owned networks back into Albuquerque to a regional facility carrier hotel. So we're really realizing the economies of scale and the low transport costs. And then we work with the communities along the way to help them. And Acoma is here, and Isleta is here, our partners, and both of them have TBCP grants, and they're doing their own last mile projects. So we support their initiatives. We don't, say what that initiative needs to be. Everybody has their different version or vision of how they want to connect their communities. So that's been great to be able to work in partnership with our communities, and we'd like to see it grow. And for tribal communities, we're working in New Mexico. I'm not sure where you guys are working, but owning and operating the infrastructure, and even if we don't have the capability to manage it immediately and you want a managing partner, fine, but just retain ownership of the asset. We're all maybe maybe we don't like the way our power has been delivered. Maybe we wish that we had control of that asset, and maybe we're trying to get it back. But this broadband is a greenfield enough situation where we can start with the ownership. Let's keep it within us so that we don't have to ask for it back. We don't have to hire the lawyers to get it back someday. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm just setting context. Really, our environmental engineer, Phoebe, for the FAST-41 portion of this conversation is the one that has the experience in leading the effort to get through the permitting process. But I will say that when you're doing 324 miles over remote New Mexico, that it's an adventure. And I think even FAST-41 was surprised on how many of those agency logos we have to go through. And that's just federal. That's not even the state ones. We have 3 BIA offices that we have to get right of way through. So we started in August last year, I guess. So we're gonna hopefully get through EA in July of 2024. So we'll have been in there about 18 months. And right now it's all a paper game. So we ordered fiber. It was 2 years at that point with the supply chain lead time. And what we did is we said, okay, well, we know it's gonna take 2 years. And it was a liability to the project though, because if you can't spend on construction funds until you get through EA. So if we bought the millions of dollars of fiber and then something happened with EA, the project would be liable. So what we did is we said, okay, we're gonna order it, but then we asked them, when can we cancel? So we were able to cancel, we have that date set aside, which is at that July date as well. So we had to reduce our project liability by factoring in our procurement so that the school and the tribes wouldn't be liable for any costs. So that worked out. The timing worked out, but it was part of the planning process to get through the EA. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Phoebe Swina, and I'm, go ahead and next slide. And as Kimball mentioned, I'm leading the environmental assessment process through NTIA as the lead agency, because that's where the funds are coming out of. And FAST-41, this is a FAST-41 project. And so as Poqueen mentioned, that whole group of federal partners and agencies that any project could potentially have to deal with, we're actually dealing, like Kimball said, we're actually dealing with them. So over 300 linear miles. And I think on our first phone call, we had 40 different federal representatives on the line. It was over 40. and so if there is a federal agency that has ownership in New Mexico, we're probably going through that federal agency. So Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, BLM, and our tribal partners as well. And one thing that I think for me, as part of this, as we look at the footprint here, is that the aspect of the tribal component has been really important. In my other work, I work a lot with our tribal and Pueblo communities to advocate for comprehensive analysis and consultation and engagement from our tribal communities and Pueblo communities. And for those of you that don't know New Mexico, and we're so lucky that many of our pueblos and tribes still live in the same footprint that they have since time immemorial. And so, but with that comes the added consideration that we make sure that wherever the line goes within jurisdictional boundaries of pueblos or tribes, or outside of jurisdictional boundaries of Pueblo tribes, we are still in Pueblo tribal country anywhere within New Mexico. And so that was a really difference with this project, is that this project has been the seed and the ask of our tribal leadership and Pueblo leadership. So really having not just consultation, but engagement has been a unique aspect of our project, in that this has been the ask for Pueblo and tribal leadership coming to the table. And that true engagement also allows us to reach out and engage those particular Pueblos and tribes to ensure where we're going through will align with good stewardship and consideration of cultural, ecological, historical, and all of those natural resource assets, and importance of how we navigate that throughout all 324 linear miles. And why that's important is because when we do engage federal agencies like Forest Service, National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, that all that upfront work that we did on the project to reach out to tribal leadership, all 20 Pueblos and tribes, all those partners that you see on the board here, that goes a long way to having done a lot of that pre-analysis. So we're not coming to the table having not done our homework. And I work with other hats that I wear, on large infrastructure projects. Like there's a large transmission line called Sunzia. There's other, North Path project, the renewable energy transmission lines. And they're having to consider, one went through the FAST-41 already and one is considering it. But again, the impact and the analysis of where the footprints of these projects go to is that upfront homework. To have the partnership with the engineers, the environmental folks that know NEPA, because if there's any federal funds associated with the project, comes the NEPA requirements. Whatever, and that's just the law of the land. And so what does that mean though? How can you then have a proactive approach and actually leverage NEPA and say, and go to the federal agencies and say, hey, we've already done our homework. And so with this project, what I'm also hopeful in demonstrating with the FAST-41 is there's tons of other infrastructure projects out there. Like I said, the North Path, the Sunzia, and other major infrastructure projects through New Mexico. But this is a way that we're hoping that we have true engagement of the local and tribal Pueblo communities to really ensure that there's that true engagement and understanding, and then also collaboration. So we meet the needs of our tribal communities as well. And I can tell you umpteen stories of how we had utility lines going through tribal and Pueblo lands, major transmission lines like natural gas lines, electrical lines, and for over 3 decades, our tribal communities did not benefit or were not connected to those critical infrastructures. So with the FAST-41 process, we're hoping to demonstrate that we can actually utilize that process to demonstrate very efficient and document that consultation process with each federal agency that we're dealing with. You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, we could go to the next slide. Well, Craig, this was your slide. It was supposed to have the permitting timetable.
So there's, okay. So the next slide, is there another slide after this? Yes.
There we go.
Okay, there we go, perfect. Okay, so this, first of all, I'm Craig Lidekin. I'm an infrastructure project advisor with the Permitting Council and assigned to this project. So happy to be working with Phoebe and Kimball and Poqueen and others on this. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And the slides that I'll talk about are the specific permitting timetable that's developed for this project. And so what you see on the screen here is an example of that timetable. This is actually the timetable for the Santa Fe Indian School project. On the left-hand side, you see the different required authorizations that are part of this project. So when a project gets brought into the FAST-41 program, the lead federal agency is required to consult with the project sponsor and the other cooperating agencies to develop a permitting timetable within 60 days. So within those first 60 days of the project being on the dashboard, there is a schedule that is built. And one of the things I want to point out that's really important is that it is built in consultation with the project sponsor and the cooperating agencies. So that means that Santa Fe Indian School, Phoebe and Kimball, have a role in playing in developing this timetable. So anytime a date on the timetable shifts, it's not a movement that happens to them, to the project, it's a movement that happens with them. And so that's a really important component to this process. You heard Phoebe talk a little bit about the different agencies. On the left, you'll see there's a right-of-way authorization for BLM, a right-of-way authorization for Fish and Wildlife is joining the dashboard soon. There are BIA right-of-way authorizations, endangered species consultation, the NEPA process, the environmental assessment, and a host of other things that are on this dashboard. So all of these you see here are represented. You can see the green flag is when the project started, FAST-41, and then the bars within the chart, or the times, they're the times that each one of these actions should take. Let me go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is an example of a specific line. So on the previous slide you saw, let's say for example, let's see, this one is the environmental assessment. So NTIA had a line on the dashboard to characterize the environmental assessment, and it's just a bar. It doesn't tell you much until you click on it. And when you click on it, you can see the specific milestones. Now these are major milestones, not every single one in between, but major milestones for the environmental assessment process. So NTIA was responsible for developing these milestones and putting dates to those milestones to say when they're going to complete those steps. That's hugely important. Each one of those actions on the previous slide on the left has the same setup where there are milestones built within each action with specific days and specific times to which then those agencies must adhere to the schedule. Now, one of the things that Poqueen talked about was the elevation procedures. So what goes into this is a lot more than just seeing a milestone and some dates on the dashboard. There's a lot of work that actually goes into achieving those dates. And sometimes we run into sticky situations where the agencies might run into some issues that they need to work through. Maybe someone's not being as responsive as they need to be and whatnot. We get to come in and help unstick those sticky issues. And the elevation procedure, that if something needs to be elevated, and we have done that here for some of the right-of-way authorizations, we elevate that to the headquarters level within those agencies. So you saw the slide in the beginning with each of the agency symbols. Those are deputy secretary level participation in the permitting council. So we raise those up to the highest levels within those agencies to help then get that top cover to help unstick those sticky issues. And so this is just an example. So like I said, each one of these that you saw on the left-hand side will have this schedule. Doesn't mean that dates can't move. Dates certainly can move, but if they move, it's in consultation with the project sponsor and the cooperating agencies. And TIA is responsible for bringing that family together to work through the schedule and bring that to completion. Our job is then to work with the agencies and the project sponsors to hold everyone accountable to the schedule and work through those tough issues. Okay.
All right. Well, is this working? Well, so I think that, we wanted to give you an idea of what FAST-41 is and, how we're working with the Santa Fe Indian School. I would like to note that the Santa Fe Indian School is the first tribal project to become a part of FAST-41. So the tribal eligibility is relatively new. It was passed just a couple years ago by Congress. So we're really excited to have this as one of our first tribal projects. But I think I just sort of want to turn it over to Phoebe and Kimball to maybe for our last few minutes just talk about what's worked with FAST-41, how being a part of FAST-41 has been different than maybe other projects you've pursued where you didn't have that permitting assistance, and yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then I'll hand it back to you. So to sum it up, FAST-41, I don't spend that much time in Washington, but you can recognize, some big landmarks. You see buildings, some big logos. And then you see all the buildings with no logos and kind of invisible. So I was like, who is this permitting council? Where are they? Because they're an agency, but we've never heard of them, or I hadn't heard of them. But basically, they put visibility on your project and coordinate the federal piece at least. And then essentially they're your spirit guide, right, to hold the agencies accountable to get you through the timelines that they promise when you don't necessarily get that phone call back. They also hold you accountable because you have to submit your half of the paperwork, right? So it is very much moving us through that time frame. And our project's big, it's middle mile, so it has a lot of those components. So if you're just working in a small area and maybe you think, you can get a CADX and you don't have you're not going to have all these requirements, then maybe you don't need to do FAST-41. But there's certainly most of us with even just constructing on our lands are going to hit a number of these agencies. So it's really been a blessing. The way we applied was we met with them they're traveling, and then we met on site, and then we did an application, which was I think just a couple pages. It was pretty simple, and then we were entered into the program, and then we meet bi-weekly with our NTIA team. And then we have maybe more quarterly or those initial calls with the agencies. And then the people from the agencies that were on the phone were both local and then the national offices, so that they were having to coordinate within themselves. And I will say that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has issued some directives with respect to broadband construction and right-of-way that are intended to speed up their processes. So FAST-41 has been working with them to get some consistency across the regional offices. And some, we have 3 regional offices we're going through. So when we submit our paperwork, you want common set of expectations for turnaround time, and that it's going to be, your project's going to move forward with some common expectations. And that hasn't necessarily been the experience, with some of our other projects. And that's for a variety of reasons, COVID, notwithstanding. So I think this opportunity for us to work with FAST-41 in the context of broadband and all your projects, which I hope that some of you will follow up with them because they've been, very engaging and easy to work with, will better our experience like nationwide for all the tribes so that we can get through all this paperwork and meet all those NTIA requirements for build out. And as you know, or some of you who are already TBCP participants, it's an evolving landscape. So NTIA is learning how to administer their programs. And sometimes, 6 months ago when we were told one thing, it's not necessarily the same thing now. So it's a bit of a moving target. So this has been the FAST-41 process has been a stabilizing factor to be able to have on time, on budget projects.
Thank you, Kimball. I work with some other pueblos and tribes that have been recipients of grant money from NTIA and other federal agencies. And I just wanted to share the perspective that to have a timetable to hold the response time for federal agencies has been really helpful. As recent as yesterday, I was on a call yesterday with the federal agency representative, and they were outlining what their thoughts were on what they needed. And I was like, well, is that on the dashboard? So I'm able to point back to the dashboard to say, okay, if that's going to be a requirement, you got to put it on the dashboard. So I know, so Craig and Poqueen know, and NTIA leads know. Because for those of you that have been TBCP recipients, the fine print of your grant documents is really important. And one of those elements of fine print is the NEPA requirement to start even potentially getting stuff spent, the major items. And then we're all on a timeline, deadline to spend this money, right? And so this is one of the big gates that you have to walk through. And so to have this tool, to have an outline also helps us because we're not tribal leaders. We're not able to have that normally, that direct conversations with federal agencies. But this process through FAST-41 allows us to say, hey, Craig, hey, Poqueen, I just got another phone call. Devil's in the details. Do I need to do this requirement? Because if you've run infrastructure, you'll get to the 95-yard line and federal agency will say, oh, you need this new survey or you need this other piece of paperwork. And then you're like, wait, I'm at 95 yards. I'm like, the end line's right there. And so that happens in many other projects that I've worked on. And so this is really a useful tool also for the clarity when a federal agency issues guidance. And laws happen. Then you have your Code of Federal Regulations, and then you have all your guidance and all of the documentation, but there's always a little bit of ambiguity. And so in order to clarify that effectively and efficiently, that's where we've already seen the benefit of our project, because we reached out to FAST-41 and we say, wait, the BIA issued this memo or DOI, we need further clarification. To make sure we fully understand, because again, we don't want to get to 95-yard line and then have to go another 100 yards. So I just wanted to share that with everybody, and of course, we're here if we have any further questions or.
Yeah, I think we could go to the next slide, and Godfrey's telling me that we have a little bit of time for questions, is that right? Yes. Okay, so we're 2 more minutes, okay. 10, all right, so if anyone has any questions, happy to take any.
So I appreciate the presentation. You had mentioned that there was is it a minimum of 200 million as far as the project is concerned to be eligible for the FAST-41?
So, for tribal projects, there's no minimum investment requirement. For non-tribal projects, there's an investment of 200 million that's required. So that's why tribal projects are relatively new to FAST-41, because there wasn't a lot of projects that met that $200 million requirement, but Congress waived that specifically for tribal projects. So we actually hear a lot from state broadband folks that they wish they could take advantage of this, but unfortunately they can't because they need to meet the $200 million requirement. So we're really excited that it is available for tribes.
Any other questions, guys?
If I can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to respond to that, I have other pueblos and tribes that have TBCP that are lower than, say in the $10 million range, and they're contemplating pursuing FAST-41 just because in the last few years they've had difficulty getting response and approvals back from one of the major federal agencies. I won't name who that agency is, but and really trying to, even though everything's within the tribal Pueblo footprint, they are really looking at the FAST-41 so that they have a partner in that engagement and that response time from the federal agencies.
Maybe you just answered my question. Just to clarify then, if you have a provider, so like if a tribe is having work done on their tribal land, but they're working with a provider to do it, and it's for less than that 200 million, is that considered a tribal project? So it can also go through this FAST-41, or is it different if it's a provider that's not a tribal provider?
Definitely talk about specifics about that specific project, but I mean, a lot of tribes use contractors to do their projects, and as long as it's the tribe is contracting with that contractor and the project is at least partially on tribal land, it would be eligible. I think we would have to hear more details about the project, but it sounds like it could potentially be eligible. So we try to interpret our eligibility as flexible as possible, but just something we would have to run by our legal counsel, some of the nuances.
Got it. Okay. Anybody else? All right then. Thank you guys so much.